Hello, I'm Gil Zilkha. Welcome to Essential Classical Music. This video is taken from my larger video on the consensus reference recordings of the core classical music repertoire. Not my choices, but rather the collective critical consensus that has filtered down through the years, across generations, across continents, to which you have also contributed. And if you agree with my choices, or if you think the consensus lies elsewhere, as always, feel free to comment, and I hope you enjoy it. All right, now let's talk about Brahms, starting with the symphonies. And for the symphonies, compared to Beethoven, I would say the symphonies, it's a little bit more straightforward. You may not agree, but I feel pretty secure in these as references, starting with the first, Klemperer, with the Philharmonia, recorded in the late 50s. Those pounding strokes at the beginning almost seem tailor-made for Klemperer. And this one is, he was known for all the Brahms symphonies, but I think especially this one. And so I would say that this one has held sway. And then for the second and the third, by the way, you ever notice how the four Brahms symphonies, they almost are like the four movements of a symphony, in that the outer movements are the more sort of dramatic, and then you have the middle two symphonies are almost like your Adagio and Andante. I always found that kind of interesting. And so appropriately enough, the second and the third symphonies, the reference version is from that gentleman of all gentlemen, Bruno Walter, with the Columbia Symphony. Pretty much universally praised, these recordings. And again, he also did well in all the Brahms symphonies, but I think these two are the standouts, and aptly coupled together in this CD issue. And then for the fourth, I don't think there's a lot of debate in terms of what the reference is. There may be some debate over whether it deserves that status from some, but the reference for this one is, again, just like the Beethoven 5th and 7th, Carlos Kleiber, his recording with the Vienna Philharmonic. So that is the symphonies. I think that one is pretty straightforward. Now, the piano concertos, this one you might consider to also not be much of a debate, but it's really a question of whether you stick with one or you expand the definition of reference to include many others. I'm just going to stick with the one obvious choice for this one, and that is, of course, Emil Gilels with Eugen Joachim and the Berlin Philharmonic from the early 70s. Classic since the day it was made, and as many great other versions as there have been, and I discussed them in my video on the best recordings. This one has sort of cast a shadow over everything before and since. So I'm going to count this as our reference for the piano concertos. Now the violin concerto. And when you're talking about violin concertos, think of it kind of like the Brady Bunch, but instead of Marsha, 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 it's Yasha, Yasha, Yasha. I'm talking, of course, about Jascha Heifetz. He dominates the field of violin concertos, and it's interesting because he can be a little polarizing in some ways. One of the, maybe the most technically gifted violinist that ever recorded, and yet he's not always everyone's cup of tea. He tended to play things in quick tempos, faster than the norm often, so it could be controversial. But this is a case where his recordings are such an event, and especially the ones that we got in stereo, which really sound, you get to hear them in really good sound. And so this is one of those cases where his recording with Fritz Reiner and the Chicago Symphony from the mid-50s definitely has to be among at least one of the references for the Brahms concerto. And what we might also start to see as we go along is that you have the Heifetz and then you have the not Heifetz. And it's a question of who is the not Heifetz, or is there one? And I think in the case of the Brahms concerto, there is one. There's a violinist who was very well known for his many recordings, both studio and live, and that is David Oistrakh. The question is, which one do you choose? The earlier one from the 50s with Konwiczny on Deutsche Grammophon, the later one with George Zell. He also did one with Kirill Kondrashin on Melodia. I'm going to say that the one with Klemperer from, I believe, like 1960 is the one that gets the most mention among Oistrakh recordings. So here you go, Heifetz and Oistrakh together for the Brahms concerto. Okay, so now let's talk about chamber music for Brahms. And again, this is a more difficult area. It's a little bit more difficult to pinpoint a reference, and more often than not, we're just sort of having to pick one that is maybe more mentioned than others. In this case, we do have a version that is sort of your granddaddy version that I think still holds a place artistically, and that's this one, if I can pull the right CD, with Reginald Kell on clarinet and the Bush Quartet. This is from the late 30s. Still occupies a position that I think you still have to count it as one of the references at least. And then the question is, do we have a modern reference? It's a little bit tougher with this piece to settle on one, but I think there is one that you can choose at least based on the clarinetist, and that is Carl Leister, the principal clarinetist for the Berlin Philharmonic for many years. He recorded it many times, and what you often hear is, get one of the Leisters, is what people say. So he had one from the 60s with the Amadeus Quartet. He kept recording it all through the 90s. I would say that the one that I've heard the most get praise, and justifiably, it's a very good recording, is this one with the Leipzig String Quartet. It's on the MD, what is it, the MDR label, I think it's called. So it's not as easy to find. But I want to reiterate, this is not a situation where we're talking about what is the recording that has the most sales or is the easiest to get. What we're talking about is the collective scuttlebutt of the people in the know, including you people watching, and what's the recording, even if it's the one that that's most difficult to find in some cases, that stands out the most as a reference. And I think among Leisters, this is the one that you hear about the most. Okay, and finally, for chamber works, let's also talk about Brahms's popular piano quintet. This one's a little bit difficult to center on one, but I think if there is one, it would be this. Arthur Rubinstein and the Guarneri Quartet, coupled with the Schumann Piano Quintet. Spoiler alert. This one's definitely a very good version, but there are a lot of other really good ones as well. So it's not as obvious for that reason, but I think if you were going to center on one that occupies a reference position, it would be this. And then finally for Brahms, let's talk about Ein Deutsches Requiem, the German Requiem. And this one's pretty clear in terms of what the reference is. Otto Klemper with the Philharmonia and Dietrich Fischer-Dieskau and Elizabeth Schwarzkopf, your dream team soloists. This one has really pretty much occupied the reference position since it was first recorded. So not much question there. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. And if you did, I hope you'll also take time to click the like and subscribe buttons. And with that, I want to wish you all a great day and happy listening.